Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Tim Stanovic. Our Spencer Critchley, he had to go. It's a crazy day, but we're going to check in with our own Josh Wingrove, who's been following all of the news and the events on this inauguration day.
No shortage of action in Washington, D.C., at the markets, and around the world.
All right, we're going to get back to that in just a moment. Let's get back to your top business stories and a check, as Tim mentioned. We're watching the markets. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Well, hello there. First of all, let me begin with what's going on with Netflix. That stock after earnings up now by 17.8%. Stocks are rallying. I'm looking at records on the Bloomberg right now for the Dow, the S&P, and Nasdaq. Investors growing optimistic that recent federal spending will revive growth and bolster corporate earnings. S&P up 53 to 3852, up 1.4%. Nasdaq is up 266 points, up now by 2%. Nasdaq 100 index up 2.4%. The Dow's up 221, higher by 0.7%. 10-year yield 1.08%. Gold's up 1.5%, up $28 the ounce to $18.68. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.6% right now, $53.28 a barrel. Pharmaceutical distributor McKesson says some shipments of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine are being replaced after they became too cold in transit. McKesson, which is distributing Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine in the U.S., learned that some of the deliveries it sent Sunday were too cold upon arrival. The company attributes the issue to gel packs used in shipping the shots getting too cold. McKesson says it is replacing the shipments, but it didn't elaborate on where the doses affected by the issue had been sent. McKesson shares today, they are trading higher, up by 0.5%. Moderna, though, is down by another 0.7%. A new administration today in Washington. How might that change the fight against COVID and distribution of vaccines? Lauren Sauer is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
I think we're going to see a much stronger coordinated federal effort to roll out some of these critical public health efforts that have really fallen to our state and local health officials, and that is going to be a huge change. I mean, I think when President-elect Biden rolled out his plan the other evening in his speech, everyone was excited. We're excited to see that coordinated response from testing to vaccine increases.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Among some of the vaccine names, Pfizer down today by 0.6%. Its partner, BioNTech out of Germany, down by 1%. AstraZeneca down 0.8%. Moderna, worth repeating, lower now by 0.7%. Recapping U.S. stocks trading at records. S&P up 53, up 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. We were talking with Spencer Critchley, and we were talking about leadership and division within the country. Let's bring in our Bloomberg News White House correspondent, Josh Wingrove. He's on the phone from Washington, D.C., because, Josh, we do need to look forward. A new era, as it is always with a new president in Washington. But I do wonder about the old division, how much of that sticks around.
Yeah, I mean, this was the whole pillar of Biden's speech today. If you noticed it, normally inaugural addresses kind of cast forward a little bit to what people want to do with their presidency. He kind of ditched the whole policy side of it and talked all about unity, the need to, take down the temperature a little bit, saying that politics doesn't always have to be a raging fire. He didn't name Trump specifically, but it was just a clear repudiation of what he believes Trump's legacy to be. So, Biden believes at least it is possible. He did acknowledge that it might sound a little naive. He tried to point to Vice President Harris as evidence that, anything is possible. Of course, historic moment for the U.S. To see her sworn in. So, this is where he's trying to go. Rubber is going to hit road real quick. I mean, they have disputes in the Senate. They have disputes over how quickly they can confirm their cabinet. And of course, that COVID bill is just going to be front and center. Biden wants something yesterday, basically, and it's not clear what Republicans have an appetite for.
Yeah, and it's not just the COVID bill. I mean, millions of Americans woke up early this morning, Josh, to find that the president, Biden, that is, would sign executive orders to swiftly unwind Trump policies on immigration, on health. Take us through the big ones here.
Yeah, and we're going to see, I think, some of these go forward, in the coming days. There'll be, imagine, a batch, or at least they've signaled there'll be a batch of stuff every day. These executive actions, like some of the things he's doing today are pretty standard. He's going to rejoin the WHO. They're going to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement. He's going to issue a mask mandate. So on interstate travel, in other words, federal turf, you got to wear a mask. And in federal buildings, you got to wear a mask. But, executive orders, Trump loved them. But the real downside of them is that, as easy as they are for a president to do, flick of a pen, they often don't have a lot of teeth behind them. And so Congress really is the gatekeeper on a lot of things, in particular, of course, stuff that requires money, and vaccines require money, and testing requires money. So a lot of his goals, particularly early on, are really going to be subject to seeing what gets done in Congress. Jen Psaki, who is his White House press secretary, of course, as about 2.5 hours ago, said this morning on CNN, she was asked, listen, is it fair to say that stopping the pandemic is his number one concern? And she said, yes, that is fair.
It's interesting. And for those who are watching on YouTube, our YouTube channel, the president and the vice president and former presidents Obama, George W. Bush, and Clinton, along with their spouses, they are at Arlington National Cemetery at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. They will lay a wreath there, and that's the visual that we've got at this hour. But I'm looking at, past administrations, and we had a financial crisis that two of them had to deal with. We had healthcare overhaul. We've had some really big agendas, but I look at the agenda, Josh, that is facing this current president. It is, as you just laid out, a massive one, a costly one. And even though he will not be the Senate Majority Leader, the new Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, will play a crucial role. Will he be more collaborative?
Collaborative is a strong word. He believes that there should be a power-sharing type of agreement, which has been done in the past when the Senate has had a 50-50 split. Now, it's been quite some time since that was the case, and in the meantime, a lot of Democrats think that Mitch McConnell played such hardball when he was majority leader that they believe he's almost forfeit the right to ask them for a penny, let alone a buck, So I think that there'll be a lot of opposition to that. Now, this will be one of the things, I think, where Biden's belief that there could be a bipartisan era still in Washington will come to the fore. If Biden sort of asks or gives his blessing to Chuck Schumer to actually try and cooperate with McConnell, that might be where they go. But there will be pressure certainly in the Democratic Party to just absolutely go hard to the wall and box McConnell out of anything. So there's a rub right now on that one.
Look,
sure.
all of this, Josh, is happening as Trump, who's no longer president, is facing trial in the Senate for impeachment. Explain the backdrop here and how Democrats can push forward this message of unity while also at the same time trying the ex-president.
Yeah, first of all, it's very unclear how this is going to proceed. Nancy Pelosi is saying she'll hand over the articles soon. It's not clear that she's not going to sit on them for a while, which could sort of drag things out. And it's very unclear that there would be enough votes to convict the president. In fact, it seems pretty clear that there are not enough votes to convict the president. And the longer he's out of office, you have to think the longer the temperature comes down.
Well, look, even with what McConnell said yesterday, he said that the mob attack on the Capitol was, quote, provoked, and he kind of condemned it in the most in no uncertain terms.
He did, but I suppose it depends who shows up. But I have a hard time thinking that 2/3 of people present, in other words, up to 17 Republicans, would vote to convict the president on his impeachment charge. I have been wrong before. It's still Donald Trump's Washington in some ways, so anything is possible. But I think right now Biden has made clear that his number one priority is not an impeachment of Donald Trump. It's this COVID package. And remember, the numbers just are alarming across the board. The vaccine rollout has been sluggish, and Biden has been saying we are in for a long winter, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Right. Let's not forget, we are focusing on politics, and we've focused on politics a lot over the last couple of weeks, understandably. But at the same time, those virus numbers, as Josh said, continue to astound. And, we go through them and we tick through them every day here at Bloomberg. But it is certainly worrisome, and that will be obviously top of his mind, top of his agenda, the new incoming president. And it does look like, for those listening on radio, watching on our YouTube channel, the new president, Biden, the vice president, Kamala Harris, they and their spouses, I believe, are headed towards the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier to lay a wreath there, and they are there along with past presidents.
The laying of the wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery is a tradition for inauguration days. And 3 former presidents today, as you mentioned earlier, Carol, Obama, Bush, and Clinton, are joining Biden. This is making this among the highest, if not the highest. This is from Laura Davison, who's live blogging this for us. Count of current and former presidents at Arlington at one time.
Wow. That's
that's surprising to me.
Yeah. Right, because it would seem like we maybe have had more in the past, maybe potentially. And forgive me, I think I said both of the president and the vice president were approaching the tomb, but and their spouses. But it is President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. They are now approaching the tomb, and will be laying the wreath there. All right, let's get to world. Josh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Let's get to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Well, President Biden is now the 46th president of the United States. He stood on the same platform that was overrun by a riotous mob just 2 weeks ago and took the oath of office. In his inauguration speech, President Biden said democracy has prevailed.
On this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries.
Biden takes office facing a variety of challenges, including the pandemic that's taken more than 400,000 lives. He and Vice President Harris are now participating in a special ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. 3 former presidents, Clinton, Bush, and Obama, are joining them. Well, former President Trump did not attend the inauguration, choosing to say his farewell to Washington this morning at Joint Base Andrews, where supporters gathered for his send-off. He said his goodbye, but also hinted about a comeback.
A goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form.
Trump departs office as the only president ever impeached twice, and with more than 400,000 dead from the coronavirus. As one of his last actions, Trump released current and former members of his administration from the terms of their ethics pledge, which included a 5-year ban on lobbying their former agencies. He initiated that pledge shortly after his inauguration as part of his campaign pledge to drain the swamp. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Nancy Lyons in D.C. with a World and National News update. We just want to tell you where we are in terms of Inauguration Day. Obviously, the new president, he has been sworn in earlier today. At this hour, we're seeing President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. They are getting ready to lay the wreath at Arlington. They're there at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. They're there with 3 past presidents. We're talking about President Obama and his wife, George W. Bush, and Laura Bush, and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. This is part of the tradition.
It is, and like we've been talking about, this Inauguration Day is different than any other in the past for 2 reasons. One is because of the pandemic that's happening right now, and we saw this play out not just in the comments from the president today, but also last night when he observed the lives lost over the last year. 400,000 at this point, Carol.
Which was very, for anyone who didn't see those pictures, I advise you to go search for it, because it was very at the Washington Monument and the reflecting pool, just to see the lights in terms of representing the people who've lost their lives here in America because of COVID. I mean, it was really moving.
It was, and I think at the same time, we've only heard President Trump speak to that. Former President Trump speak to the lives lost from the pandemic a handful of times. And it was notable this morning in his farewell address, he did do that. And we pointed out in observing it that it was a surprise to hear him, because he has spent so much time not talking about that. But What I will say is I think it does show the priorities for the Biden administration. We know that the health of the economy is inextricably bound to the recovery is inextricably bound to the vaccine
Absolutely.
and to getting beyond the pandemic. And the image of them wearing masks right now at Arlington National Ceremony, I mean, this is history in the making.
Right, which will be there forever. No, I think that's a good point. Listen, as we've said, as we've covered a lot of politics, understandably so, over the last couple of weeks, let's not forget that the big problem facing this country right now is getting the pandemic under control. If you're out there in the West Coast, if you're out there in the LA area specifically, you're seeing this firsthand. They're seeing the crisis at its peak like we saw last spring here in New York City. And, this is crucial to getting this under control. We've talked about the problems with rolling out the vaccines. And as we've opened up kind of the spigot when it comes to who can get it, now we're seeing supply constraints or logistical constraints. And this will be top of mind and something that the president and his team will have to deal with, because this is necessary and crucial in order for us to reopen our economy. We got glimmers of it over last summer, right, when it eased back here and we started to see life come back a little bit. But then, of course, fall hit and the cold weather hit, and it wasn't eradicated. So we know we need really the mass amount of the population to get the vaccine in order for us to hit herd immunity.
And Biden has ambitious goals, 100 million in the first 100 days, 1 million a day.
Yeah. So listen, this, following all of this, will go to our team in D.C., and that includes our Amanda Coulson-Hurley. She's politics editor at Bloomberg Business Week. She and her team at the magazine will be tracking this new president and his initiatives and his agenda. She joins us, by the way, on the phone from Washington, D.C. Joel Weber is also with us, editor at Bloomberg Business Week, on the remote access from Brooklyn. As we said 4 years ago, Joel, it's a new political era. It's a new individual at the White House, and that means a new agenda.
A new agenda, that's right. And it all kind of gets started now. And one of the things that we're wrestling with in this issue of the magazine which is our annual The Year Ahead issue, is obviously all of the big themes that we can expect to be talking about. And Biden and the U.S. government is going to be first and foremost on our minds. And that obviously brings us to Amanda, who there's a forthcoming story that I thought was really well done about what we can expect from Biden at the outset here. So a little sneak peek from this forthcoming issue. What are the advantages that Biden inherits, and what are some of the limitations that we expect him to encounter as he attempts to govern here, Amanda?
Yeah, well, I think Biden is very fortunate in having a Democratic trifecta, right? So, and that is something of a surprise. I think before the Georgia runoffs on January 5th, it was sort of expected that the Republicans would hold on to the Senate, and that he would be kind of limited in what he could do. But with the somewhat surprise wins of the Democratic candidates in those runoffs, the split in the Senate is now 50-50, with Kamala Harris being the tiebreaker, which means that there's more that Biden can do now. So, he's already said that he, unveiled this $1.9 trillion next round of stimulus that he's saying is that's a kind of immediate relief plan. And then he wants to do something kind of, even bigger, well, not necessarily with a higher dollar amount to it, but, a kind of maybe kind of longer term, deeper type of stimulus afterwards. So, he has some wind in his sails now, but of course he's walking into this job, with the pandemic having fiercely come back and, worse than ever. We just hit, 400,000 deaths, a terrible milestone. The economy is still really faltering. So he certainly has a very tough task before him.
The president also is eager to attack climate change. This is something that he's made clear during the transition with the appointment of John Kerry as his climate czar. And we're seeing on our live blog right now a tweet from Gary Cohn, the former Goldman Sachs COO, former Trump advisor, saying, quote, "While the Paris Agreement may be far from perfect, it is the best available option to tackle one of the greatest issues of our time. I'm happy to see the U.S. re-entering this agreement and asserting global leadership." When it comes to climate change and the environment, how are you thinking about it at Business Week and covering Biden's agenda and making sure that the U.S. is at the forefront of this?
That's a great question, and Joel might have some other thoughts on it, but I think what's really interesting is probably the way we cover it will reflect how I think maybe Biden and the Democrats will try to get major climate legislation through, which is probably packaging it as, some measures as a kind of infrastructural improvements and, research and development advances and green jobs. Biden's big climate plan, I think he calls it Build Back Better, is not the Green New Deal, but it has kind of some of those echoes of looking at climate action and at the goals of it as not just being, reducing emissions, at these kind of other benefits and at a sort of retooling the economy, right? And so I expect that he's going to be hitting those notes as he tries to achieve his climate goals, and we'll be assessing, what those costs and benefits, really are to the best of our ability.
Amanda, there's a couple other bullet points from the issue that I thought were just a great little cheat sheet. And just to kind of run through them, I think the ones that we're the most interested in for the magazine that will continue to hit in the days, weeks, months, years ahead. Immigration, taxes, healthcare, judicial appointments, and political investigations. I want to actually just go to healthcare first, because this was something that Biden was involved in the Obama legacy, and I'm interested in sort of what we can expect on the healthcare front, we think, in these next few months. And then also, let's take the judicial appointments.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, judicial appointments is going to be an interesting one to watch. I think, as we note in the magazine, Biden's path will be a lot smoother now, with the Senate under Democratic control. So, if one of the Supreme Court justices were to retire, there's already, chatter about maybe Stephen Breyer stepping down. There will not be a situation, where there will be a vacant seat for months and months, as there was when President Obama nominated Merrick Garland. So, that's going to make Biden's life a lot easier going ahead.
Yeah, and one thing, I do wonder, I'm curious too, Amanda, about, listen, President Trump, we're expecting him to be part of the political scene going forward. So how do you think about, he's not going to be president, but how do you think about some of the coverage that might be something you need to think about, include going forward? Or how do you think about it, at least at this point?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely he's not president anymore. And, the bar for what in the Trump universe gets covered, I think, becomes that much higher, right? But I think it is very interesting that he's going back to Florida, and reportedly a number of members of his family are also looking to locate to Florida, looking for property there. He is reportedly thinking about building his presidential library and museum in Florida. And there's also, I think, some conservative media outlets that are Florida-based that if he wanted to have more of a media presence and megaphone, he could get it there, even though he's been thrown off of a lot of social media now. But so I think it'll be interesting to kind of watch potentially this kind of Trump world take root in this kind of other political establishment of Florida.
Right.
But we'll, certainly be covering, there's still an impeachment trial to come. And I think the impeachment trial and its aftermath might answer, I think, what is a very big question, which is, in the days after January 6th, this seems to be a huge stain on his presidency and on, his allies potentially. But maybe, is that going to last forever? And how bad is that going to look long term?
Bottom line, you guys are going to be busy, no doubt. Amanda, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I know it's been a busy day for you guys. Amanda Colson-Hurley, politics editor at Bloomberg Businessweek from the nation's capital. Jill Weber, editor at Bloomberg Businessweek on the remote access. You can check out more about the year ahead. You name it when it comes to business, politics, economics. It's all in this upcoming issue. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Businessweek, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 1061 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next. Tim and I, though, we're going to get into what really is the big problem of the day, the virus.
World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Inauguration Day 2021. Stocks higher, trading at records. But first, we begin with a developing story. Citigroup is going to be reducing bonuses for dozens of its top executives after the bank was reprimanded by regulators last year. The move is another sign of the efforts that Citigroup is making to appease the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Federal Reserve after both regulators dinged the bank for failing to properly maintain risk risk management systems and other internal systems. Citigroup shares trading lower right now by 1.04%. An update, as I mentioned, stocks are rallying, investors growing optimistic that recent federal spending will revive growth and bolster corporate earnings. The S&P at a record up 55 now to 3854, up by 1.5%, close to the day's best levels. The Dow is up 236, up 0.8%. Nasdaq is up 283. That is a gain of 2.1%. 10-year, the yield there 1.08%. Gold right now up 1.5%, 18.68 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%. Little change, up 26 cents the barrel right now at 53.24. Home builder confidence is ebbing, and with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The National Association of Home Builders reports its confidence index slipped to a 4-month low in January. Builders are facing higher lumber and materials costs as the pandemic disrupts supply channels. Lean inventory is also an issue, with many homes priced above what prospective buyers are willing to pay. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Airlines around the world are slashing more flights into the new year as the worst crisis to hit the industry shows no signs of letting up. Europe remains the region hardest hit by curbs on travel. Among some of the U.S.-based airlines that do fly into Europe, UAL trading higher by 0.9%. UAL, by the way, reports after the bell today. American Airlines Group up 1.8%, Delta up by 3%. After earnings today, Netflix shares surging now by 17.8%. S&P at a record up 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
So, Tim, I think it's safe to say that we've got two top stories today. Obviously, the swearing in of a new president of the United States. We've covered that. The other, the biggest problem that faces the Biden administration from day one, and that is the health pandemic.
Yeah, it is. Look, 400,000 people have died in the United States as a result of the pandemic.
Right.
As you and I mentioned, the economic recovery inextricably linked to the successful rollout of the vaccines. Carol, it is such a shame that the vaccines were developed at record pace, but the rollout has been so bumpy, and we can only hope that it gets smoother.
And this on a day where we had a story, you and I both saw it, New York City rescheduling 23,000 vaccine appointments due to shortages, that supply shortage. Let's get to someone who's been a go-to voice for us often. He oversees the largest healthcare provider and private employer in New York State. Back with us is Michael Dowling, President and CEO at Northwell Health. He's also author of the book Leading Through a Pandemic, The Inside Story of Humanity, Innovation, and Lessons Learned During the COVID-19. Talk about creating the playbook as we go. He joins us on the phone once again from New Hyde Park, New York. Michael, nice to have you back. How are you and how's your team doing?
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with you. We're doing well. The team is doing well. Been at this, COVID issue now for a long, long time. But healthcare workers are very resilient, and we are doing well. Positive morale, and obviously looking forward to being able to vaccinate as many people as we possibly can now.
But are you seeing shortages when it comes to access to vaccines?
Yes, I mean we have the infrastructure is in place, which takes a couple of weeks to set up. We have multiple sites available to do vaccinations, but we don't have enough supply. And hopefully, if we get the supply, and I'm hoping now with a new leadership in Washington that there will be a change there, but we can vaccinate a lot more each day if we know that we have the supply and we know when it's coming. And that's the only restriction at the moment. I mean, most of the other startup problems that we may have had a month ago, 3 weeks ago, have been resolved. And today it's a matter of getting enough vaccines.
Well, speaking of that, we learned earlier today that New York City has had to reschedule 23,000 vaccine appointments due to a shortage. What happens if somebody gets their second dose late?
Well, you do have a couple of days of leeway here, and we should be doing everything possible to make sure that the people get the second dose around the time that they're supposed to get it. So what I'm doing here at Northwell is that I am reserving doses for the second. I'm reserving vaccines so I can guarantee to people that if they get the first dose, I will have the vaccine in place to give them the second dose. And that's the way I believe this should be done, so we can guarantee when people come in, that there will be enough available for them to get the second dose. I believe that it's the right way to do it. I believe the science supports it doing this way. And if you don't get the second dose at all, I do know you have some immunity, but we don't know how long it's going to last, and we don't know how effective it's going to be.
Right.
I don't think it's a chance worth taking.
Michael, I'm going to go Tom Keene on everybody for a moment. Tom Keene, our beloved Tom Keene of Bloomberg Surveillance. You run a massive hospital system, healthcare system. Right. You can pick up the phone and call a CEO of Pfizer or Moderna and say, what's the problem? What is the holdup in terms of getting more manufacturing of vaccines? Is it we don't have the factories? Is it that we don't have the bottles? Do we not have the needles? What is it? And what are you hearing?
I hear that the production process is being accelerated, and we hear that there will be many more vaccines made available now in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully even sooner than that. I have not spoken to any of the pharma companies directly or personally. I believe that's up to this point, that's what the federal government was doing and working with them closely, hopefully. So I don't know the exact reason why it has been a little bit slow to this point. But remember also, if you go back, it's only like, 6 weeks ago, 5-6 weeks ago, since the vaccine was made available the first time.
Right.
So people have to be a little bit patient here. I mean, there are people that want instant gratification. Something just happens today and they want the world to be fixed tomorrow. It takes a little bit of time. I'm hoping with new leadership in Washington that everything will be accelerated, and hopefully we will have new vaccines by Johnson & Johnson maybe in the future.
Right.
And who knows with AstraZeneca. And so I do think time will take care of the problem. The trouble is everybody's getting impatient, and I understand this. We want this over with as quickly as we possibly can. We are ready once the vaccines arrive.
To be fair, though, Michael, is that we knew this vaccine was coming for a long time. I mean, these were conversations I think we had with you months ago as well. And I'm not pointing the finger at you, but I mean, I think the system overall, the government overall, knew that logistics and distribution were going to be a big part of this. And I just wonder what happened.
Well, I think that it wasn't thought through as well as it should have been. It was excessively micromanaged. You had, groups 1A, groups 1B, 1A+, and excessively micromanaged. I have felt from the very beginning where you have very large systems like ours, and you just give us the vaccines, you give us general guidelines, and then you get out of the way. But it was a little bit overly bureaucratized. And hopefully we're learning from that. But we are where we are at the moment. You can't go back and undo what happened a month ago or 3 months ago. We are where we are. We are ready to go. We are vaccinating. I vaccinated about 43,000 employees and about 20,000 people in the community. And we're now doing second doses. And I've opened up about 25 vaccination sites. But I had to close 5 of them a week ago because I didn't have enough vaccines. That's the problem now, and I'm optimistic that this will be taken care of in the relatively near future.
All right, sit tight for a second, Michael, and we really appreciate it. You've always been your candor about the situation and what's going on. We've always appreciated it. So hang on for a second. We're going to do a little bit of news, and we'll come back to Michael Dowling. He's president and CEO at Northwell Health. He's with us on the phone from New Hyde Park, New York. So, I mean, it's a tough situation. I agree with him. We do have to be patient, and it's a massive undertaking.
It really is. And the second dose thing is a big question. I went to the dentist yesterday. They're waiting for their second doses.
They are waiting. Okay, good to know. All right, let's get back to world and national news. Back on over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Carol. Today's inauguration had a theme of unity, starting with a performance from Jennifer Lopez.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California.
President Biden is calling on all Americans to come together in pursuit of a more perfect union.
With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus.
Biden was joined on stage by his vice president, Kamala Harris, who made history by becoming the first woman, the first black person, and the first Indian American to serve in that position. The former California senator was sworn in shortly before Biden by Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Well, former President Trump left Washington hours before the inauguration. He spoke at Joint Base Andrews before leaving for Florida. Bloomberg's Karen Chase with more.
After boarding a military helicopter on the White House lawn, President Trump bid goodbye to a small group of family, friends, and supporters in military ceremonies at Joint Base Andrews. And he offered well wishes to the new administration.
I wish the new administration great luck and great success. I think they'll have great success. They have the foundation to do something really spectacular.
He touted the swift development of a coronavirus vaccine and the creation of the Space Force as among his proudest accomplishments. But he leaves behind a city battered and locked down because of rioting he was impeached for inciting. Karen Chase, Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. We're going to get right back to Michael Dowling. He is president and CEO at Northwell Health. In the meantime, we've got another virus headline to bring to you, and this has to do with McKesson. It's replacing some shipments of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine after they got too cold in transit, underlining kind of what we've been talking about, some of the logistical challenges and hurdles that face the U.S. vaccination campaign. It's not easy, we know.
It's not easy for a few reasons. One of those is because the mRNA vaccines, those are the vaccines from Moderna and from the Pfizer and BioNTech partnership, those have to be kept at a very cold temperature. And those include little sensors that show just how warm or cold a shipment is, so it can monitor throughout the duration of a shipment. But one of the issues is that if it gets too hot or too cold, then it becomes unusable.
I have to say, a few years ago, did a kind of a deep dive into UPS and spent time in Louisville at their massive setup and went through a lot of their facilities.
Louisville, Carol.
Louisville. I know.
For everybody listening in Louisville.
Louisville. I know. I'm going to get a bunch of emails and tweets on that. But it was fascinating because they had a whole section at that time that was devoted to pharmaceuticals and refrigeration, because that's what was involved in not just, I mean, obviously this was pre-COVID times, but just various medicines that needed to be kept at certain conditions in order to ship them around.
We heard our previous guest, you were going back to Michael Dowling, President and Chief Executive Officer of Northwell Health, talking about looking forward to other vaccines, hopefully ones from Johnson & Johnson, right, AstraZeneca, and Oxford. And the good thing about the other vaccines is the shipments should be easier, especially with the AstraZeneca vaccine, because it won't have to be kept at such cold temperatures. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are continuing to be optimistic about new developments, because if they're not mRNA vaccines, they won't have the same restrictions and challenges as far as logistics go.
And let's just hope more vaccines means there's more production facilities that are playing into this, because I think that's part of it too, just getting the number of vaccines available for individuals. That is something that certainly has to be upped in a big way. All right, we're going to continue talking about the virus. We'll get to that in just a moment. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are higher. We're looking at records. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. And here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks climbing today with those FANG stocks really surging. Dow's currently up 231 points. S&P's gained 54. Nasdaq climbs by 276 points. And those FANG stocks, well, they're up 5.3%. The U.S. 10-year-old at 1.09%. Gold is up 28. And transports rise 200 points. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, only financials were in the red, and leaders to the upside in the Dow, Microsoft and Apple, while Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan led to the downside. After earnings, Morgan Stanley was little changed. Procter Gamble fell, and Netflix jumped 18% to a record high. In other news, Amazon offered to help the U.S. reach its goal of 100 million vaccinations, and the WHO may authorize AstraZeneca's COVID vaccine in January or February. Wrapping things up, Alcoa reports after the bell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie.
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg Times Squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. We do want to point out for those who are listening on radio and watching on our YouTube channel, instead of the traditional parade down Pennsylvania Avenue, there will be a virtual parade across America. There will be performances from all 50 states and several territories. At this time, though, the new president and vice president are proceeding to the White House and getting a presidential escort. So they are on their way to the White House. So just wanted to give you an update. And if you want to see that, just check out, as I said, our YouTube channel on, you can just search on Bloomberg, just search on Bloomberg Global News, and you can also see it on the terminal. Just go to Live Go. Still with us is Michael Dowling, president and CEO at Northwell Health, on the phone from New Hyde Park. So Michael, when do you feel like we start to feel more normal as a society where things are opening up and maybe we're still wearing masks, but there's a sense of security that we will have when we go out and do things with other people in maybe larger groups that we don't currently have right now?
Well, I think that hopefully we will see an opening and breaking of the crisis in the next 3 months or so. I would hope that by the end of the spring that we would be able to get out and about a bit more. Hopefully the restaurants will be opening. I hope that would happen sooner. So I think we're going through this until the end of the spring. But we have to be careful, though. I think we have to be continuously cautious, and that, and especially now when the vaccine is being distributed, that people still wear masks to the extent that they can, that there's still social distance, that we don't do stupid things. I mean, we don't get together in large groups where it is very obvious if you don't do the right things, you have the possibility of transmitting the virus. So I think we have to be careful. I don't think we will be back to a normal, it'll be a new kind of normal, I think, until the early fall. And I think we can handle this. I mean, we have to be optimistic and positive about this. It's a bit of a disruption, but we can handle this, and therefore we have to look at it with a positive attitude.
I like your attitude. I think it's been really a challenge for me in January. I think a big part of it is, being away from my family for the holidays, the disruptions, and also, of course, just the staggering numbers of deaths that we've seen in the United States. I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking for so many people out there, and I think every American has been affected by this. It's just no way they haven't. I've been talking a lot with my wife about this, what this looks like on the other side, Michael. She was saying, hey, I think we're going to be wearing masks for a very long time. Like, we're going to be the generation that wears masks, and our kids might think it's weird. But that's us. I mean, is that what you see? Is that the new normal?
Oh, I think that when masks are not that difficult to wear. I mean, I agree. Used to it. I mean, it's not.
So that's a yes.
I'm not complaining. I'm just wondering, like, when we talk about the other side of this, like, are we going to go back to being able to not wear masks around the office?
Well, I think, for example, we've had very little flu season this year. Less kids getting sick from normal flu stuff. I think in the future, let's assume COVID disappears this year, and next year, and the flu season arrives, I think you will see more and more and more people wearing masks. That they will say, this is a very good preventive way to prevent normal, regular things from happening during regular flu season. So I think that masks will be with us for a long time. That some groups of people, have been wearing. If you've been in the city 2-3 years ago, you saw certain people from the Far East wearing masks, walking around the city.
And if you were traveling around the world, you'd see it too.
Around the world, yes. So I think it's going to be part of our arsenal, part of our costume going forward. Not necessarily all the time, but when we believe it is necessary, I think it'll be with us. And we're protecting each other, we're protecting our friends, our neighbors, and preventing people from getting sick. So what's the big deal? We will get used to it like we get used to a lot of other things.
Listen, if we can carry our phones around with us all the time, can't we just kind of add on a mask and just make it kind of the norm? No, I'm serious, right? Like, you would have thought that there would have been, years ago. Yeah, go ahead.
Somebody will probably be innovative enough to put a phone inside the mask.
Now we're talking.
I was actually just thinking,
There's
right,
always
wouldn't
a
that be
tech
the great
angle.
thing? What's the thing, though, that worries? Just last question, Michael. I love your optimism, too, and I love your realism. What's the one thing, though, that worries you just a little bit here? And just got about a minute left.
I think that, today with the new change in Washington, a dark cloud has been lifted, and I think we can see a little bit of sunshine. We can see hope and decency, hopefully, and a sense of optimism about the United States is a great place. New York is a fabulous city. New York is going to come back. We've gone through a rough period, and I just think that we should look forward with a great sense of positivity and optimism. Unify, trust one another. Throw oxygen on that which is good, not on that which is not so good. Be positive and build a sense of community. The one thing COVID has demonstrated is that we're all interdependent. What happens in one part of the community affects every other part. We've all been affected by this. We have to bring back that positive sense of community. We're united. We're Americans. We're proud. We're positive, and there is nothing that we cannot achieve.
Hear, hear.
Okay.
Oh, little music to take you out there. There's gremlins, I think, everywhere. Michael, what a nice way to wrap it up there. Michael Dowling, President and CEO at Northwell Health. He's also got a book out, Leading Through a Pandemic, and I highly recommend that people check it out. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. This inauguration, we've heard a bunch of music so far and a lot more yet to come, I think, in this parade across America. We're going to hear from a lot of different bands and musical acts.
And we're going to hear from Dave Wilson.
Our own band and musical act.
Yes, with his chart of the day in just a minute. And the song of the day, I'm guessing it's not going to be Lady Gaga.
Hey, who knows, right?
Who knows?
We'll see what happens. All right, we'll get to that in just a moment. Let's get back to your top business stories. Another look at that trading day. 29 minutes to go, Charlie.
Indeed, higher across the board, knowing Dave Wilson's got to be born in the USA on inauguration day. Bruce Springsteen. Here's what's going on. Stocks are rallying. Investors growing optimistic that recent federal spending will revive growth and bolster corporate earnings. S&P up now by 57, a gain of 1.5%. The Dow's up 264, up by 0.9%. Nasdaq up 282, higher by 2.1%. Right now, Dow, S&P, Nasdaq, all at records. We've got the Nasdaq 100 index up 2.5%. Dow Transport's up by 1.6%. Russell 2000 higher as well today, up by just 0.3%. 10 years up 230 seconds. 10-year yield 1.08%. Gold up $30 the ounce, up 1.7%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 53.24 a barrel. A new administration in Washington, so how will that change the fight against COVID and the distribution of vaccines? Lauren Sauer is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
I think what I would like to see is a return to these trusted public health entities. So in particular, the CDC, seeing more of Dr. Fauci again, seeing more of those NIH scientists who did so much work to get these vaccines ready to go and in place in such an incredibly short timeline. So scientists, I think we all want to hear more from.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Pharmaceutical distributor McKesson says some shipments of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine are being replaced after they became too cold in transit. McKesson, which is distributing Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine in the U.S., learned that some of the deliveries it sent over the weekend were too cold upon arrival. The company attributes the issue to gel packs used in shipping the shots getting too cold. McKesson shares, they are higher today, up by 0.6%. Moderna shares, they're down by 0.1%. Among some of the other vaccine used stocks that we follow for you, Pfizer shares down 0.5%. BioNTech lower by 1.1%. AstraZeneca down by 0.4%. Recapping, S&P up 58, a gain of 1.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right. Thank you, Charlie Pellet. And for those of you who are watching on Bloomberg and on YouTube, we are watching right now the Vice President, or President, I should say President. I keep forgetting.
President-elect.
Yeah, President, not even President-elect, President Biden.
Yeah.
En route to the White House ahead of the inaugural parade.
Yeah, exactly. And it is going slowly, and it's obviously a very different situation because there are no huge crowds. But nonetheless, after a busy day, and he's on his route en route to the White House. So we'll continue to follow it. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg. Well, we were trying to figure out what you were going to do, Dave Wilson, and Charlie was like, born in the USA, and this is a really good choice. And I'm trying to remember, is this Steve? This isn't Steve Winwood, is it? No. No, it's, I don't know
who is this?
It's really familiar, and I can't think of who it is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's because, the band's named for, the guitar player, and he doesn't sing, so they have this sort of succession of singers over the years, and maybe that's why. But we're talking about Santana.
It is Santana. You know what? It's funny. It came up on my cheating Google search. Yes, I did it, people. But I was like, no, that's not Santana.
Can you tell from hearing the guitar, Dave?
Well, once you get into the solos.
But he's not singing, right? Which is what you just said.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. That's it.
mean, that's the thing, and they've gone through a number of singers over the years. Santana has the band.
I did not know that. All right, so tie it up to your chart of the day, please.
In case you want to look at a group of stocks that's winning, it's also a group that's losing. It all depends on how you look at them. Do you look at their share performance, or do you look at their bottom lines? It's a Goldman Sachs index. They call it, non-profitable technology. That's the name of their basket, and so you have this gauge that goes with it. And, it's one that Jonathan Krinsky over at Baycrest Partners, he's their chief market technician, highlighted in his latest note. And you go back to March, this Goldman index has risen almost fivefold. And it set a record low in the middle of March, so it shows you just how strong the rally has been. And consider that over the same time period, the S&P 500 Information Technology Index has only risen about a fifth as much. So in other words, these money-losing companies, and, I don't know exactly which ones are in the index, but, you think about companies like Snowflake, right? The one that's backed by Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. You think about Uber and Lyft and a whole lot of companies like that. Their shares have done really well, and they're not making any money. So, these are the sort of companies.
What is this index called?
It's the non-profitable technology basket.
I like how that's called.
The non-profitable technology basket.
I like that. There's some honesty in what that's called. They're not trying to dress it up at all.
Not to be confused with the Ain't Making Move Money Index, right? I mean, it's really, though, but it's fascinating. You're right. It's very clear and transparent, Dave.
Yeah, and, a very extreme move. Extraordinary, as Krinsky wrote, and he doesn't figure it's going to be sustained. But just to see it, it's kind of staggering. You think about, what happened in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. A whole lot of money-losing companies were leading the way as stocks rose. So if you want to see what's happening now, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Dave, if you bring up the late 90s and non-profit, not profitable companies, you got to talk about why investors think this time is different.
Right, because, a lot of the companies that have been market leaders, think big tech. Whether we're talking about Amazon or Google's owner Alphabet or whoever, they are profitable, and quite so. But then you have this other group of companies that's really kind of developing, maybe recently public, not so profitable. That's the distinction.
So they have some examples of companies that weren't profitable for a long time, like Amazon, to point to and say, hey, like everybody says, right? I will be the next Amazon.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Right, but as we know, that was a long journey, and it's not always the case. Love that index. All right, Dave, thank you so much. Dave Wilson's going to be back a little bit later with his stock of the day. I agree. I like the transparency of that index.
Yeah.
Profitable technology companies.
Some they call them growth stocks or not profitable companies.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get back to world and national news. Lots going on in the nation's capital. Nancy Lyons is on it all. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris continue to celebrate their inauguration. They've been reviewing the troops and going to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington National Cemetery, where they were welcomed by cannon fire. The Bidens are now in the inaugural parade, which just made its way to the White House. The parade, though, is largely being held virtually due to the pandemic. Well, it was just before noon today when they took their oaths of office after walking up the stairs to the west front of the U.S. Capitol, where a riotous mob attempted to overturn their election just 2 weeks ago. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Washington.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
President Biden, in his inaugural address, said democracy has prevailed. The nation can meet its current challenges if unity can be restored.
The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, we must confront and we will defeat.
The president said the turbulence that faces the nation is not new, but its causes can be addressed and resolved. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
The Capitol police officer who lured a mob away from the Senate chamber during the January 6th attack was welcomed with applause today as he entered the inaugural stage. Officer Eugene Goodman was a security escort for now Vice President Kamala Harris. A bipartisan group of House members has introduced a bill to award him the Congressional Gold Medal. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Just want to remind everyone who's listening to us on Bloomberg Radio, watching us on YouTube, right now we do see President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. They are, I think, just getting to the White House. They've been on their way from Arlington National Cemetery and en route, a very different parade route because of the pandemic, but also because of the security.
In normal times, this would be an actual parade, and perhaps you'd actually see the president and vice president walking together along the parade route, but instead this time you're looking at an area that's clearly heavily fortified, and you have members of the Secret Service wearing masks because of the pandemic.
Exactly. So we'll continue to monitor it and bring it because we do expect the president to be at the Oval Office, I think around 5 or so. I think he's still got some things to do, but certainly getting closer.
He's got a lot of work to do, Karen.
He's got a lot of work. Someone who did a lot of work on his way out was President, or former President, I should say, Donald Trump, granting clemency to dozens of people today, including his former strategist, Steve Bannon, the rapper Lil Wayne, and former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, some of his or one of his final acts as President of the United States.
There were some surprising names on here, and there were some names that weren't surprising, Carol. One of those is, former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. He's a Democrat, and the president did pardon him. Another name on here that was really surprising to me was former Google executive Anthony Lewandowski. This is an autonomous driving engineer.
We covered this story a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a fascinating story. I was shocked to wake up this morning and see that his name was included on this.
An autonomous driving engineer. He was ordered in August to spend 18 months in prison for stealing trade secrets from Google as he defected to Uber Technologies. It was one of the highest profile criminal cases to hit Silicon Valley. Basically, he was charged with taking the technology and bringing it over.
I read through the entire list of pardons this morning as I was drinking my first cup of coffee at like 4:45 this morning. And
Good morning.
Some of them were listed as who supported him. Peter Thiel was one of the names that supported Anthony Lewandowski being pardoned.
Right, exactly. One of the few big tech executives that's been a supporter of Donald Trump. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelleton. Another leg higher for stocks. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. The Dow, the S&P, Nasdaq, they are all at records right now. Stocks are rallying as investors grow optimistic that recent federal spending will revive growth and bolster corporate earnings. Treasuries little changed. Right now we've got the 10-year yield 1.08%, up 230 seconds. The S&P's up 60 to a record 38.59, up 1.6%. Nasdaq up 287, up by 2.2%. Nasdaq 100 index up 2.6%. The Dow up 303 points, up by 1%. Dow Transport's up by 1.7%. Can't ignore the Russell 2000 up today by 0.5%. After the bell, we will be hearing from Alcoa, and ahead of its earnings report today, we do have Alcoa shares trading a little changed. Also surging today after earnings, Netflix up 17.5% after last night's better-than-expected earnings report. Recapping S&P at a record up 59, up 1.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, it is time for the drive to the close, but driving to the White House, and actually not driving anymore to the White House, is President Biden and the new First Lady. They are actually walking up to the White House the last, I would say, block or two or so, couple of blocks. They got out of the motorcade. They were going from Arlington Cemetery on their way back to the White House in a motorcade along with the vice president. They got out and walked and were actually greeting members of the press and other individuals on the side of the road. This is much more reminiscent of what we have seen in inaugurations.
I was just going to say that, Carol. There is some sort of semblance of normalcy here. Masks certainly excluded from that. But, the idea that everybody is in masks makes you realize that this is 2021 and that we're in the midst of a pandemic right now. But, there's a sort of sense of normalcy to this inauguration, even though it was far from normal.
And reacting with people who, the voting public. And what's interesting is we are now seeing the president and the first lady there at the White House. You can watch this on our YouTube channel as we speak. Just search on Bloomberg Global News. You can also, if you're on the Bloomberg, go to Live Go and watch this coverage as well. But again, walking up to the White House, the new president and the new first lady. All right, we'll continue to monitor the comings and goings of the new president. Right now, though, we do want to get to our market guest. Ryan Jacob is back with us, Chairman, Chief Investment Officer, and Portfolio Manager, Jacob Asset Management, a top performer. The Internet Fund, the Jacob Internet Fund, beating just about all of its peers over the past 5 years. In the 91st percentile, according to our data, returning 37% on average annually. Ryan, good to have you here with us. Ryan's on the phone in California. New administration, potentially new era, maybe new regulations. How does it factor in, if at all, in terms of how you think about the stocks that you are investing in and including in your funds?
Well, the administration change is obviously a big deal. The relationship among the larger technology companies has been pretty terrible recently, so I don't imagine it'll get worse. How much better it gets is hard to know. There are a lot of other democratic priorities that could become issues here, but for the most part, I would say conditions will probably improve.
Conditions will improve between. Let me make sure I have this right. Between the administration and the tech companies.
I believe so. I think it'll be a little less. Yeah, in some ways, in terms of the administration change in the White House, it'll probably be a bit less combative.
That's interesting because there is, there does seem to be some bipartisan agreement, rare bipartisan agreement to, I don't want to say rein in big tech, but, there are monopoly concerns when it comes to some of the large tech companies. And then on the Republican side, there are concerns about free speech and Section 230. I'm, not going to get into those now, but it does seem like the tech companies are in the crosshairs of Democrats and Republicans. But you don't think there's too much to fear?
I think the free speech and Section 230 issues were more existential threats for the larger tech companies. I think that the antitrust issues are more what we're used to in terms of scrutiny, and it's not going away for sure, but it'll probably be more manageable. Unfortunately, it is going to be something that's going to be there for the next few years that's going to create a lot of headlines. I think in terms of actual actions, will be pretty limited.
And we do want to point out President Biden and the First Lady and his family, they are at the White House and they are entering into the building. Hey, so Ryan, transformative technologies, you look at the tech sector, you've done really well. Let's talk about names that you like. Twilio is one of those. It's an infrastructure software company. It's already up about 14% this year. It gained 244% last year. What is it that you like about this company specifically?
Well, Twilio has really enabled communication, the evolution of communication of businesses through the pandemic. Companies that were offline companies had to learn to get online quickly. So whether it's through delivery or notifications, Twilio provides kind of that utility-like aspect to electronic communications between the business and their customers. A lot of businesses had been considering adding these features. COVID really pushed it forward and made it a necessity. And these are features that won't go away. So Twilio has been a huge beneficiary of this. And we think that will just continue.
We're going to be talking to co-founder and CEO Jeff Lawson tomorrow. What would you ask him?
Well, I guess broadly speaking, as we're communicating in different ways, whether it's device to device or on social media platforms, how they basically help their customers integrate, so they're touching their customers at all these different points and enabling two-way communication that, quite frankly, is probably one of the biggest hot button issues for company in terms of being able to communicate and knowing their customers. So it's really increasing the breadth rather than being just text back and forth or your Ubers in the corner. It's more a broader picture of how this communication can go back and forth.
Ryan, I also know, thanks to our producers, that you described some of the run-up that we've seen in companies like Zoom, Peloton, Shopify, Tesla, these so-called COVID names. Extreme euphoria is how you describe it, and you say they're highly inflated. Big question is are they due for a pullback?
Well, Twilio is an example of a company where things were accelerated, and there's a real use impact there. With these other companies, they saw an enormous uptake of their services because of stay-at-home orders and work from home, et cetera. So, and their valuations have really just exploded. And so the question for these companies is there some sort of artificial effect in the results that will be difficult to replicate this year as we get out of COVID? And because the valuations are really reflecting their business progression in 2020, does it reflect 21 and 22? That's the big question.
Well, it's interesting. Tesla's not just I can get what you mean in terms of Zoom and Peloton and even Shopify. Tesla, though, you're just saying that because they were just doing so well this year. This wasn't necessarily a pandemic story, but you're questioning whether or not that growth continues this year?
Tesla is a whole different conversation.
Okay.
You're right. There's no doubt. And there's a whole host of other different issues there. And they really are, you get into the conversation, is it a car company? Is it a technology company? There's a lot of debate back and forth. We don't own Tesla.
Why don't you own it?
With it?
Why do you just...
Well,
just quickly.
Yeah, the valuation is, you have to assume that Tesla will be the unimpeded leader of the electric car industry over the next few decades. And that's not something we'd be comfortable saying at this point.
Right, especially when there's more and more competition. There's a story in the Bloomberg about kind of everybody, whether it's VW, whether it's BMW, they're all kind of gunning
They
for
have
Tesla.
to.
Yeah, right, exactly.
They have no choice.
All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. We are thanks to Ryan Jacob. We've got the close in just a moment.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Records on Wall Street, folks from Janus Henderson Investors virtually ringing that closing bell as we wrap up the trading day on this Inauguration Day 2021. And as we await the latest numbers out of Alcoa, Kinder Morgan, Discover, and United Airlines. Stocks rallied as investors grew optimistic that recent federal spending will revive growth and bolster corporate earnings. Treasuries little change. The dollar weakened right to the numbers. S&P up 52 to close at a record 38.51, up 1.4%. The Dow up 257 points, up 0.8%, also a record there. Nasdaq surging to a record up 260 points today, up by 2% to 13,457. 10-year up 3/30 seconds, 10-year yield 1.07%, gold up 1.6%, 18.70 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 53.24 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. So rallies today on Wall Street, also records. As for the earnings outlook in financial markets, Tobias Lefkovich is Chief U.S. Equity Strategist at Citigroup Global Markets.
Markets will benefit from the earnings growth, but markets usually reflect it about 9 months in advance. So we pulled forward some of the strength in the earnings story for 2021 into the market in 2020, particularly the last 3 months.
And among today's biggest winners, shares of Netflix ending the biggest year in company history with a bang, powering its stock to a record. Netflix surging today by 16.85%. Morgan Stanley traders cashed in during the waning months of 2020 to round off the bank's best year on record. Morgan Stanley shares lower today, little change, but down 0.2%. And Procter Gamble is boosting its sales and profit outlook on expectations that surging at-home demand for its toilet paper and laundry detergent will continue. Procter & Gamble down today by 1.25%. Recapping, S&P at a record up 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Wild thing, think you move me.
I got a few moves I know you'll like.
Shaking all over.
Bloomberg Business Week. Movers and shakers.
Shaken, not stirred.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Masser in our Interactive Brokers studio. Charlie breaking down those closing numbers. Yep, we had a rally on Wall Street on this inauguration 2021. S&P, as Charlie mentioned, up 1.4%. Dow up 0.8%. Nasdaq just below that 2% mark. What did it mean, though, for the S&P 500? Pretty broad-based. 324 names in the index, higher today, 177 lower, 4 unchanged. And if I bring up, and let me just do the fancy finger work on the Bloomberg terminal. If I bring up the major industry groups in the S&P 500, there are 11. 10 of them were higher. Top of the pack, communication services, up 3.6%. Bottom of the pack, financials, which have been in the news big time because of big bank earnings over the past week. They were down as a group, down 0.5%. Consumer discretionary, number 2 gainer, up 2.3%. So we definitely did see a broad-based rally in today's trade. All right, let's bring in our Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter, Sarah Ponzak, also tracking the trade for us. We're watching what's been going on in D.C. Lots to be done by this administration, and they've got some pretty ambitious goals. Having said that, an old investment story kind of back in fashion again on this inauguration day, Sarah.
Right, a return of the FANG trade today. And it's interesting, especially we have an inauguration day. Certainly markets are forward-looking, and markets have been pricing in expectations for policy reform from the Biden administration for months now, ever since we knew the outcome of the election, and especially after the Georgia runoff. But the FANG trade, big tech, really just coming back big. Of course, that was really led by Netflix. Netflix today, and I know we broke down the numbers together yesterday when those earnings numbers did drop, but closing at $586 a share. That is a 17% gain just today, depositing Netflix at a new high. We also have a new record for Google parent Alphabet, too. And you mentioned the communication services sector up 3.6% today, your best performing sector. Netflix makes up about 7.5% of that sector. So a very hefty weighting there. Also, another way to look at it, just because we've been talking about this rotation from large caps to small caps, from U.S. to rest of the world to growth to value for quite a while now. If you look at
the Russell 2000. So you look at small caps, also closed at a record high, but up less than a half of a percentage point today. Meanwhile, you have the Nasdaq up 2.3%. So you have the widest gap there in favor of large cap stocks since all the way back in November. And it's actually the third day of Nasdaq outperformance too. So interestingly enough, ever since the banks really started reporting earnings on Friday, we have started to see a change in the underpinnings and the feel of the rally.
So Nasdaq's up now about 4.4% for the year overall. The S&P 500, we're looking at a little bit more than a 2% gain in the index. And we're just, a couple of weeks in here. You know, Sarah, it's interesting. I want to go back to Netflix. You pull up that chart on the Bloomberg, and it's been kind of bouncing around. I feel like you go back to November. It did trend higher, but it's been kind of stuck, I feel like, in somewhat of a range. And then you look at today's move, and it's just a straight shot up.
Yeah, it's astronomical. But this was really the case for the majority of the FANG names. We had that tech-heavy sell-off, that tech-heavy correction that was back in September. And ever since that occasion, that month for the most part, after that pretty unbelievable rally that we saw over the summer and all those mega-cap tech stocks, we hadn't seen big tech leading the pack higher. We hadn't seen Apple return to a record, Amazon return to a record, Microsoft, Netflix for that case until today. But today you saw a change in that in Netflix, and we do see the other FANG names just following suit. I mean, if I look down the list of the largest S&P 500 companies, you have Apple today at 3.4%, Amazon at 4.6%. I mean, considering how large these companies are, these are large moves. So to see not only Netflix shoot higher, but the others too, you wonder if it represents any sort of inflection point going forward, just considering the fact that there were so many people who were really gung-ho on this growth to value or small cap rotation ever since we got that positive vaccine news.
Hey, listen, I want to mention this was a story that crossed by our Josh Wingrove and Nancy Cook. There was a headline about the Biden team fearing the virus surge imperils the pledge to curb the pandemic. And basically, Joe Biden's team increasingly worried that the pandemic is spiraling out of control. And apparently, I guess as they learned more about the federal response to the pandemic, Biden's transition team grew alarmed at a lack of coordination with states, according to those familiar with the matter. And, you know, I do wonder whether or not some of the enthusiasm might be squeezed out of the equity markets, especially if the numbers that we're seeing with COVID, Sarah, continue to be kind of dark and ominous. Just quickly, your thoughts on that?
Well, this is the key point of optimism and the key preface point for optimism in 2021, that we have a successful vaccine rollout. Bank of America put out their fund manager survey today. The number one risk, the number one tail risk, is the vaccine rollout. So if there are any hiccups here, it's certainly going to weigh on the markets, but to be seen.
Yeah, you got it. Hey, thanks so much. Sarah Ponzak, our Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
Hey, Mr. Wilson. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson is with us on the remote access from New Jersey, here with his stock of the day. And what do you got for us? XP, is it
EXP World Holdings, Carol. That's it. It's a real estate brokerage. It doesn't have real estate for its agents. Instead, the company uses internet-based three-dimensional software for what they call an office environment. eXp World also gives agents a share of commissions earned by others they bring into the company. eXp World was founded in 2008 and went public in 2013 by merging with a shell company. The stock traded over the counter before moving to Nasdaq in 2018. The ticker is EXPI. eXp World shares rose more than fivefold last year thanks to a pandemic-driven housing boom. They climbed another 26% this year through yesterday. After the close, eXp World set a 2-for-1 stock split payable February 12th. Now, the split will cut the price of a single share in half. While the move won't change the company's market value, it exceeded $6 billion for the first time today. And eXp World rose as much as 22% to a record, closed with a gain of almost 16%.
All right, good stuff. Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Just want to inform our audience and those watching on YouTube that the Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband and family, they are right now arriving at the White House as well. They have followed that parade, I should say, or walking with the president. They were just behind him, so they are now at the White House. All right, let's get to world and national news. Nancy Lyons.
Thanks, Carol. Well, the nation has a new leader in charge.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
President Biden spoke of unity and said the will of the people has been heeded.
We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed.
And history was made as Kamala Harris was sworn in as the first woman, first black, and first Asian to be the nation's vice president. Well, there was no cheering crowd spread out before the National Mall when Biden took the oath of office, a concession to the pandemic. But there were 25,000 National Guard troops securing the streets of Washington in response to the Capitol attack. After some ceremonial duties and a scaled-down parade, the Bidens have finally arrived at the White House. Well, President Biden made a promise to work for all Americans, and he's planning to move quickly to implement his agenda. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Nathan Hager.
The new president is signing at least 15 executive actions in his first hours in office, including a federal mask mandate, rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, and halting construction of the Mexican border wall.
People fail to appreciate that executive orders, while they're easy for a president to produce, they're oftentimes very difficult to implement.
Brookings senior fellow John Hudak tells Bloomberg Biden's team of experienced hands will be key in putting those actions into place. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. I'm Carol Masser. Joining me right now is our own Charlie Pellet. Charlie, this story just atop the most read in the past hour on the Bloomberg terminal has to do with Citigroup. They're going to cut bonuses, reduce bonuses for dozens of its top executives after the bank was reprimanded by regulators last year. And this was the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Federal Reserve, both regulators dinging the bank, for failing to properly maintain risk management systems and other internal systems. So I guess they're just starting to tell people.
Indeed. It's a story written by our Jenny Serene. Interesting to point out, too, that Citigroup shares today did move lower, down by 0.7%. Not so sure, though, that the decline was any reaction to what was going on with the bonus reduction story.
Right.
But also, too, you look at all the financials today. I'm looking at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Deutsche Bank, Barclays, all trading lower today, even though we saw records for the Dow, the S&P, and Nasdaq. And should point out, too, that a spokeswoman for Citigroup declined to comment. Carol, just getting Alcoa's numbers, fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA, $361 million. Estimates on Alcoa, the aluminum maker, $348.2 million.
Right, quick check on them in the after hours. And Alcoa, we're just seeing the stock down about 2.6%, so some reaction there. Just going back to that story, it is an exclusive by our Jenny Serene. The reductions in those Citigroup bonuses, they're going to vary widely depending on the size and structure of each executive's pay package, according to those in the know. And executives who report directly to the management committee are being told this month of those decisions. Citigroup's board, though, still weighing final compensation decisions for the 15-member executive management team, including the company's CEO, Michael Corbat. So it could go, I guess it sounds like, Charlie, all the way up.
Indeed, and certainly an ongoing story. Again, as you point out, Bloomberg exclusive, and she does great reporting work. Our Jenny Serene, absolutely amazing. Yep.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. And just a reminder, Charlie did mention those Alcoa earnings, as he said, fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA, $361 million versus an estimate of $348.2. Sees lower quarterly performance in the aluminum segment, but that stock down almost 4% in the after hours. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Moments ago, we heard from Alcoa. The aluminum maker reported sales for the fourth quarter that met the average analyst estimate. Alcoa does see lower quarterly performance in its aluminum segment. After hours, Alcoa down now by 2.6%. Records on Wall Street as investors grew optimistic that recent federal spending will revive growth and bolster corporate earnings. Nasdaq 100 index jumping more than 2%. S&P 500 had its best first-day reaction to a newly elected president's inauguration since January 20th became the official start in 1937. S&P up 52, a gain of 1.4%, a record 38.51. The Dow up 257, up 0.8%. Nasdaq up 260, a gain there of just under 2%. 10-year up 3/32, 10-year yield 1.07%. Gold up 1.6%, 18.69 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 53.24 a barrel. Recapping records on Wall Street with the S&P up 52, up 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Big day, and among our most read stories on the Bloomberg about what the new president of the United States plans to hit the ground with in terms of actions. And some of those actions he may take very soon as he gets himself settled into the White House. He is at the White House as we speak, along with the First Family. Let's get into it with Alex Wayne. He's White House editor on the phone from the nation's capital. Alex, good to have you here. It's been a busy day for the president. It's not done, and he is expected to take some actions right away. What are we anticipating?
That's right. In about an hour, he's going to start signing a series of executive actions that will do a combination of things. One, start to erase some of Donald Trump's policies. Two, advance some of his own health policies to try to start to curb the pandemic, which is really kind of out of control as he enters the White House. And three, he's going to sort of smooth the path for the government to issue future regulations. He wants to. He comes into office, of course, with a 180-degree different opinion on government regulation than the former president. President Biden is pro-government regulation and wants to make it easier to issue regulations. The former president famously had a rule that the government had to eliminate 2 regulations for every new one it issued.
Well, and it's interesting, too. I want to go back to the pandemic because, as we've said, we've been focused on politics, understandably so, over the last couple of weeks because of what happened in the Capitol 2 weeks from today, in terms of the breaching of the U.S. Capitol. But at the same time, one of the main issues will be dealing with the pandemic. And members or colleagues of your team in D.C., Josh Wingrove, Nancy Cook, put out a story about how the Biden team fears the virus surge. And I guess as they've learned more about the federal response to the pandemic, President Biden's transition team grew alarmed at a lack of coordination with states. And I do wonder, whether or not we're going to hear maybe some of why we've seen some problems in terms of logistics and distribution, and we'll maybe get a little bit more transparency about what's been going on when it comes to getting the vaccine out to everyone. And maybe it means the promises of the Biden team might take a little bit longer to get more Americans vaccinated.
Yeah, they're worried about meeting the 100 million doses in 100 days
already
goal that the president has set. Yeah, they're already worried about that. I'll note here that the Trump people think that they're kind of lowballing that estimate. The nation's already at like 800, 900,000 doses a day, and so to get to 100 million doses in 100 days, they just have to do another 200,000 doses a day, right? But the Trump folks are concerned that the manufacturers, Pfizer and Moderna, of course, are the only companies with vaccines right now, can't increase their production maybe to meet that goal.
What about on a global stage? And that's such another big thing. Like, I do feel like President Biden and his team have to hit the ground running on so many different things, but that includes the reputation across the globe.
They're making a big move today. Biden is going to sign an order putting, I guess the way they put it is re-engaging the United States with the World Health Organization. Donald Trump, of course, pulled the U.S. out of the WHO last year. He was concerned that the WHO had been too influenced by China. President Biden is going to rejoin the WHO, and Tony Fauci, the government's foremost infectious disease expert, is going to represent the United States in a WHO board meeting tomorrow.
All right, so that'll be done right away. What about things like that was so very near and dear to President Trump, like the wall specifically, and some of the travel bans, immigration policy?
Yeah, a lot of that was just executive action by President Donald Trump, who failed to get a comprehensive immigration reform legislation through Congress. And so much of it can be erased with the stroke of a pen by President Biden. He's going to do that. He's going to stop construction on the wall. He's going to end the travel ban on predominantly Muslim countries. And he's going to scale back interior enforcement in the United States. The sort of ICE raids in Latino neighborhoods and workplaces that drew a lot of alarm from advocacy groups. That's not going to be happening anymore under Joe Biden, or at least it'll be happening a lot less frequently.
You know, it's amazing, like this long list of things that are in this story that's on the Bloomberg, including, I think the president's expected now to implement new ethics rules for political appointees across the administration, which is something President Trump did not do, right, on his way out, and I think he was maybe expected to, but he didn't.
President Trump made a very interesting move last night. He, of course, famously ran for office, promising to drain the swamp here in Washington, and instituted a ban on lobbying by officials who joined his administration. Last night, hours before leaving office, President Trump eliminated that ban on lobbying. He revoked it, and so now his former officials are free to start lobbying as of 12:01 this afternoon.
So, Alex, do we anticipate that this is once again going to be an administration? I'm not pointing fingers. It's just another administration where we kind of govern by executive orders, or do we ultimately see that we get back to where lawmakers, policymakers in Congress actually have some say?
Yeah, I think with the Senate very narrowly divided, 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, President Joe Biden is going to have as much trouble getting legislation through Congress as President Donald Trump did. Even when President Donald Trump his party controlled Congress, he had trouble. And while there's a lot of happy talk today about the inauguration, and Mitch McConnell spoke cordially to the president and the vice president, when the rubber hits the road, when they start actually trying to pass laws, that's when the friction is going to show up. But we already saw Mitt Romney today say he's got some concerns about the stimulus Joe Biden wants to pass.
Yeah, we were talking about that a lot earlier, too. Alex, thank you so much. Busy day for you, and I know the entire team, Bloomberg News team there in Washington, so thank you for filling us in on that. Alex Wayne, he's White House editor. He's on the phone in Washington. It is 4:25 on Wall Street. We are expected to hear from the president and actually see a signing of those executive orders that Alex was just talking about. So we will continue to track that for you.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. A lot certainly going on today. And coming up, we're going to dig into an interesting story. It's in the current issue of Bloomberg Business Week magazine, a disturbing one, but really tells the tale of what many people and business owners, small business owners in particular, are going through. We'll get to that in just a moment. First up, let's get back to some of the comings and goings in the world of business. Here's Charlie Pellet.
All right, let's kick it off with aluminum. Alcoa reporting fourth quarter earnings that beat analysts' expectations. Aluminum prices surged. Sales continue to improve from the reopening of economies, but shares of the biggest U.S. aluminum producer moving lower after hours, down now by roughly 4%. The manufacturer has set a high bar for stock performance heading into this new year. Shares almost doubled in the final 3 months of 2020. Best quarterly performance in records going back to 1980. Alcoa down roughly 4% after hours. Stocks continued their winning ways today as Joe Biden took the oath of office as the 46th president of the United States. Technology shares led the charge. Both the Nasdaq 100 index and the Nasdaq 100 Nasdaq Composite Index up today by roughly 2%. At a record on Nasdaq, S&P up 52 today, up by 1.4%. Nasdaq, by the way, up 260 points today. The Dow up 257, up by 0.8%. Dow Transport's up 1.75%. Small caps lagged. The Russell 2000 up today by 0.4%. So it was an up day on Wall Street. As for the economic outlook with stimulus, Alicia Levine is chief strategist at Bank of New York Mellon.
This economy is 70% consumption. And whether households are saving the checks or spending them, GDP will be going higher. And with that, the sectors that are levered to the cyclical recovery will move higher as well. And this trade will have legs.
And speaking of consumption, where's your next vacation? Airlines around the world slashing more flights into the new year as the worst crisis to hit the industry shows no sign of letting up. Europe remains the region hardest hit by curbs on travel. Carriers operating at about a quarter of their capacity before the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. This according to John Grant, an analyst at aviation data group OAG. Among some of the U.S.-based carriers with flights to Europe, UAL higher today by 1%. American Airlines Group up 1.3%. Delta up by 3.25%. BlackRock adding Bitcoin futures as an eligible investment to funds. First time the money manager is offering clients exposure to the cryptocurrency. Bitcoin today down 4.7%, 34,751. Recapping stocks at a record. S&P up 52, up 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So we're going to slow it down a little bit and take you to a story that's in the current issue of Bloomberg Business Week magazine. It's a disturbing story. It's a very illustrative story of what's going on around the country because of the pandemic, where for many, options are pivoting and runways are coming to an end. So let's get into it with Bloomberg News finance reporter Noah Buhire, who joins us from Seattle, along with Liz Dunn. She is the founder of Dunn & Hobbs, and she's the subject of Noah's story, and she joins us on the phone from Seattle as well. Thank you so much both for being here. Noah, I want to kick it off with you. Tell me what you set out to do in your reporting and how you were led to Liz and why her story just resonated with you.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. So Liz and I actually started chatting several months ago. I think it was in April or May of last year for a project that I'm doing for Business Week, following small businesses in one neighborhood here in Seattle through the COVID crisis. And over the months, in several conversations with Liz, I was just struck by all of the sort of financial and business bonds that she had created in developing this really several properties on this really cool block in Seattle. Just how COVID was really putting a lot of those relationships under strain. And what I wanted to do was tell a story about real estate and small business and all of these links between people and how they got through the first 10 months of the pandemic and what it might take to get them through the next 10.
So, Liz, come on in on this. First of all, how's your year been?
Oh, Carol, it's been pretty challenging. I've been doing small-scale real estate for about 20 years, and I've survived through a couple of previous crises with 9/11 and then, the economic meltdown that started in 2008. But boy, this takes the cake for sure.
Well, and to be fair, and what's interesting, and it's one of the things we've talked about a lot, Liz, is, companies, big and small, had to learn to pivot. Like, I feel like I've used that word a million times over the past 12 months. You did as well, and you had some things going for you in terms of, where your real estate was located, what kind of tenants you had. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I kind of operate at a scale that really caters to locally owned small business. And so I love to renovate old buildings and then cram a bunch of smaller users kind of into one project where it can create a real critical mass of interest in terms of retail and restaurants for the customers. And we're in a really great neighborhood called Capitol Hill. It's kind of the cool, funky alternative neighborhood in Seattle. But the problem is that these small family-owned businesses are super vulnerable. And as Noah and I discussed, of my 20-some customer-facing businesses on this one block, they were all impacted in various ways by shutdowns or other aspects of the pandemic.
So, Noah, as you were doing your reporting and talking with Liz and unfolding this story, what struck you?
Well, a couple of things. One is just how much the businesses that are tenants at Liz Property were able to pivot and just sort of do what they could to keep revenue in the door. Another thing was just Liz's willingness to do whatever she could to keep them afloat. So what that meant a lot last year was Liz had to go out and negotiate with her banks, the folks who have mortgages on her property, and get some sort of relief there so she could turn around and pass, basically give her tenants some wiggle room. And I think that's like a hugely important and underappreciated aspect of what's been going on here. And, from the outset of this crisis, I spoke with one of Liz's lenders, the CEO of Home Street Bank, which is a regional bank here in Seattle. Mm-hmm. And their willingness to work with Liz over the last couple months has just been huge. But I think Liz and Home Street also thought that this pandemic would be over by now. A lot of us did.
Yes.
And so really the point we're at in this crisis now is everyone's having to come back to the table now and figure out what makes sense for the next several months.
Listen, hang on, guys. Noah and Liz, hang on for a second. I'm going to do a little bit of news, but we're going to come back and continue this conversation. Let's right now, though, check on world and national news. A lot happening on around the country and in the Capitol. Here's Nancy Lyons.
Thanks, Carol. President Biden is now the 46th president of the United States. He stood on the same platform that was overrun by a rioting mob just 2 weeks ago and took the oath of office. In his inauguration speech, President Biden said democracy has prevailed.
On this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries.
Biden and Vice President Harris have reached the White House following an afternoon of reviewing the troops, receiving gifts, laying a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns, and participating in a scaled-back parade. An inaugural concert will be held later tonight. Former President Trump did not attend the inauguration, choosing to say his farewell to Washington this morning at Joint Base Andrews, where supporters gathered for a send-off. He said his goodbyes, but also hinted about a comeback.
A goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form.
Trump departs office as the only president ever impeached twice and with more than 400,000 dead from the coronavirus. In one of his last actions, Trump released current and former members of his administration from the terms of their ethics pledge, which included a 5-year ban on lobbying their former agencies. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Charlie Pellet is back with me, and one of the stories by our own Shonali Bosick, she caught up on Bloomberg TV with Ralph Schlosstein, who is over at Evercore. He's the New York-based investment bank Evercore. He's co-CEO. He said the United States, Charlie, should adopt a $15 minimum wage. It's a move that's being contested by one of the nation's largest employers, and by that I mean Walmart.
Indeed. Just how busy is Shonali Bosick, by the way?
She's busy.
She's talking to a lot of CEOs up and down Wall Street. Bank earnings upon us right now, so she is one busy woman. But yes, to your point with Walmart, Schlosstein parts ways with Doug McMillon, the chair of the Business Roundtable, also the CEO of Walmart. Speaking of being pretty busy, he said this week that wages should be higher, but he does not support President Joe Biden's plan to double the existing minimum, which has been $7.25 since 2009. Let me put that $15 number in perspective for you.
Good, because I was just doing some math too. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You do the math.
Well, $15 an hour, that comes out to about $600 a week. So do the math. Times 52, right? How much is that a year? That's $31,000.
$31,200. Is that a living wage, I ask you?
I doubt it. Like, as he says, a $15 minimum wage basically gets you to the poverty line for a family of 4. Anybody who works 40 hours a week, hard at a job, ought to be able to at least be at the poverty line or above. And this is coming from Ralph Schlosstein. I mean, you can live on that here in New York. That's hard.
Well, to Doug McMillon's point, though, if you're living on that in Bentonville, Arkansas, that's a lot different than trying to live on that in Boston.
So maybe it needs to be, I don't know. How do you do that, though? Do you do it based, maybe. People have talked about that when it comes to various policies, right? The cost of living on the West or East Coast is going to be very different from living in the heartland.
Indeed, and therein lies the heart of the debate. When you're talking about a federal minimum wage, that's all 50 states.
All right, we'll see where this comes out in this new administration. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Appreciate the assist. That was Charlie Pellet. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Alcoa, after earnings, now down by 4.3%. Stocks rallied to records as investors grew optimistic that recent federal spending will revive growth and bolster corporate earnings. S&P up 52, a gain of 1.4%. The Dow up 257, up by 0.8%. Nasdaq up 260, a gain today of 2%. 10-year up 3/32, 10-year yield 1.07%. Gold up 1.7%, 1871 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 53.24 a barrel. After earnings, a surge for Netflix today, up by 16.85%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. Want to get right back to our discussion. Bloomberg News finance reporter Noah Buhire with us. So too is Liz Dunn, founder of Dunn & Hobbs. And the subject of Noah's latest story that is in the current issue of Bloomberg Business Week, both of them still with us on the phone in Seattle. What's interesting, too, and there's a stat, Noah, that jumped out at me about the strain that we're seeing in terms of, U.S. retail landlords. We've talked a lot about this on air, counting more than $50 billion in missed rent payments last year, according to estimates from CoStar. And some of those maybe will never get paid, but we've been watching so closely, Noah, the real estate market for looking for signs of strain. And it's big players, smaller players, but we've been watching it very closely, especially as we increasingly see in our communities. We see it in New York City. A lot of retail restaurants, they're not there anymore, and they're just boarded up, and they're empty places.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about Liz's properties is the resilience. I mean, there's been a lot of work that has gone in to keep those businesses afloat. And, another thing that should be noted is that the block where these properties are was just really steps from where a lot of the racial justice protests were in Seattle. And there were periods over the last year where these businesses had to board up. But, I think Liz worked with her tenants. She could say more about this, I'm sure, to just sort of make it clear that, they were open and functioning to the best of their ability.
So, Liz, how crazy was it? Because it sounds like there were a lot of things that made survival possible. It was government programs. It was bank forbearance. There's a lot of things. I mean, just what was it like, in terms of finding the pieces to kind of keep it going?
Well, I think you're right. It was a jigsaw puzzle, and it continues to be a jigsaw puzzle. And, that's why I really appreciate Noah telling this story, because I think the plight of the mom and pop landlord, I think that story is not really getting told as much as it should. But, our tenants, we helped all of our tenants connect with banks if they didn't have one, so they could apply for the PPP resources. We are once again with this round coaching them and connecting them if they don't have those relationships. The protest zone was half a block from us, and that made the months of June and July really difficult. And even today, there was a swarm of bicycle cops that just rode around our block because our area has kind of become a flashpoint for protests on various issues. And so that kind of continues. But, I'm so lucky to have relationships with local banks. And that was intentional after the last downturn, when I realized that these big national banks, they're paying no attention to the plight of one little landlord in Seattle. Now I only deal with local banks where I literally, if I needed to, could walk into the office of the president.
That is such an important story. It's something actually my husband and I were talking about, the importance of local community banks. Noah, we've talked about this, the big banks. There's been a lot of pressure even since, of course, the financial crisis to, work within the smaller business community, think about kind of neighborhoods, and there's been a lot of pressure on them. But we've realized how important it is, these local community banks, in terms of the relationships and understanding their communities and the needs of them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point and something that's very salient. And Liz's story is, I mean, really what we're talking about is the difference between what any city really looks like after we're through this pandemic. It's as Liz said, it's been a jigsaw puzzle, and putting together all the pieces in a way that the world resembles something like what it was before the pandemic just requires a lot of action from a lot of different people. And community bankers tend to have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in their backyard. And, the loans that Liz has, they probably, would be a complete rounding error for a large national bank, but they're not trivial for a smaller bank. So my reporting, what I gathered was there was a lot more willingness to sort of look at the totality of the situation and try and imagine a way to get through this together.
Were you, and Noah, you mentioned talking to Mark Mason, the CEO of Home Street. Are they, here it is, a local smaller bank, right? Financial institution. Are they feeling increasingly the strains the longer this goes on? I'm assuming yes, but I'm just curious what you might have heard.
What's interesting about Mark is that he helped turn around Home Street after the last recession. He came in, I want to say 2010, maybe 2009. And
another really, tough time.
What he explained to me is that this moment is fundamentally different, and he sort of generally thinks that real estate values are going to hold up, and that he has some wiggle room to work with borrowers and try to get to the other side. Now, obviously, that's not going to be true for all real estate. There are segments of the market that have really been impacted and might take quite some time to get back. But I think it's an important difference that people should have in mind as they look and try and think through what's going to happen in the commercial real estate market in the U.S. That bankers are looking at their loan books differently now than they were a decade or so ago.
Liz, from what the headline of the story, my runway is over. How much more runway do you have, since we don't know quite how much longer this pandemic will go on? Just got about 30 seconds here.
Well, I mean, I think there's a sliver of hope in this story, as we've seen, but just because I'm lucky to have these local relationships, but I am going to need more help. The pandemic is right now as bad as it's ever been. And so it feels like it's going to take years. Like, I'm now being realistic. It will be bad this year, but even 2022 will be a recovery year. So we're hanging in there.
Okay.
But we're going to need more help.
Well, good luck and great reporting, Noah, by you. Noah Buhire, he's finance reporter at Bloomberg News. Liz Dunn, founder of Dunn & Hobbs. Find that story in the current issue of Bloomberg Business Week magazine, also at Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg. All right, coming up next, Kevin Cirilli with Sound On.
Hello.
What a day.
What a day. I just got back to the Bureau. Okay, I have a question for you, Carol Master.
Sure.
Which senator, after the ceremony, got a selfie with Lady Gaga?
I don't know.
Who do you think it is?
Which senator? Klobuchar?
No, but that's a good guess. Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin? No.
Can you see?
Way.
So I'm watching. I just get off air. I'm watching the whole risers. There I am, and then I see Gaga, with the big Hunger Games brooch on her, and you can't miss, reflecting off. And then I see Senator Joe Manchin, the most important senator right now in the new Congress. He's like the centrist to watch, and he's tapping her on the shoulder, mask on, don't worry. And takes a selfie. I've got Carolyn Maloney. Maybe I'll ask her if she got a selfie with Garth Brooks in his hat.
I saw people who got it with J-Lo and A-Rod. It was nuts. Anyway, have a great show, kiddo. You've been working your tail off.
Thank you.
Sound On with Kevin Cirilli is coming up next, right here on Bloomberg Radio. Not to be missed, just in a few minutes. Have a safe evening, everyone. I'm Carol Massar.